All right, here we go, folks. Welcome to another edition of Art Brunch, where, of course, we explore the wisdom of the art, spirituality, and the great ideas. We are no longer going to be discussing artificial intelligence, which make some of you happy who experience a lot of anxiety when you hear the words AI and robots and doomsday prophecies regarding the two. So we're on to something a little bit more upbeat, and that is beauty. I think we all appreciate beauty. It's one of humanity's most persistent and, frankly, most perplexing concerns, occupying the minds of philosophers and artists and ordinary people across millennia. From Plato's contemplation of eternal forms to Michelangelo's attempt to free the perfect figure from marble, the question of beauty's nature and purpose has shaped both our understanding of reality and our creation of art. So today, we examine the evolving conception of beauty, beginning with classical Greek and Roman thought and its later influence on the Italian Renaissance. Now, the central question that emerges from this long philosophical conversation is whether beauty serves merely as decoration for life, or whether it plays a more expansive role in human flourishing and our understanding of truth itself. The answer, as I hope we will see, has profound implications, not only for how we create and appreciate art, but for how we structure our society and pursue the good life. Now, the following quotes will be a guide for our exploration. Love draws the lover to the beautiful. This is from the 5th century CE Greek Neoplatonist philosopher Proclus. Love draws the lover to the beautiful. Have you experienced this? When you were most intoxicated with love, were you also drawn to gaze more frequently and more deeply on beauty in all its various displays, like, I don't know, a flower, a landscape, children playing? Did you begin reading poetry more or thinking poetically, even writing poetry, perhaps for the first time? Here's another quote from a Neoplatonist, Plotinus. The soul that beholds beauty becomes beautiful. We're going to be diving deep into the sentiment of that quote. And then this quote from John Keats' poem, Ode on a Grecian Urn. These are the last lines. Beauty is truth, truth, beauty. That is all ye know on earth and all ye need to know. One of my favorite lines. In the context of the poem, the urn itself, as a work of art, is speaking these lines. It's conveying a profound connection between beauty and truth. Now, combined with the previous quotes, we are drawn into a fascinating exploration of the relationship between beauty and its relationship to art and love, goodness, and truth. The Apollo Belvedere sculpture is a good example of the classical ideal of divine beauty made manifest. He represents much more than an ideal physical beauty. Look at his stance, his posture. It is a call to a kind of overall excellence. The ancient Greek word for beauty is kalos. While often translated simply as beauty, kalos encompasses a broader concept, including both physical attractiveness, but also moral excellence. It represents an ideal in ancient Greek thought, and it influenced their art, their philosophy, and their culture. So let's examine more closely the classical foundations of this ideal that we call beauty. Beauty is the splendor of truth, said Plato. Plato had two significant presuppositions behind his philosophy. First, souls are eternal, and so they are pre-existent of the physical world. And our souls then incarnate for a time on this earth, but retain a buried memory of their eternal state. That's the first presupposition. The second one In the realm or state of eternity, there exist ideal forms. These forms could be abstract, like the perfect concept of justice or goodness or the beautiful, or they could be objects, like the concept of a horse or a chair. So in Plato's philosophy, beauty in the material world is far more than simply aesthetic pleasure. It points to ideal beauty, and thus it is a pathway to ultimate truth. Plato described beauty as the only one of the eternal forms that can be perceived directly through the senses. You see, we cannot see justice itself. We cannot see goodness itself in the material world, or only infer them, at least in the material world. But we can encounter genuine beauty in beautiful objects. And this encounter awakens the soul's memory of the perfect realm of forms and ideals. So when we see a beautiful sunset or hear sublime music, we are not merely experiencing pleasure, but we are gaining access to eternal truth. That's quite a revolutionary idea. The beautiful object then serves as a kind of ladder, enabling the soul to ascend from material appearances to some greater spiritual reality. This is why Plato could speak of beauty as the splendor of truth. It makes visible what is otherwise invisible. Now, for the Greeks, math was at the heart of reality. Because nature could be understood through mathematical equations and concepts, math was literally seen as the language of creation, the language of God, you might say. So math had a spiritual quality. In fact, the philosopher mathematician Pythagoras even created a religion out of math. And the ancient mathematician Euclid derived what came to be known as the golden ratio. The golden ratio is 1 to 1.618. That was what they derived. And so Greek artists, including architects, used this ratio in many of their designs. Believing that it reflected the very thought of the creator, it was also assumed to be the most aesthetically pleasing ratio. Now, the Parthenon exemplifies this idea of beauty in stone. It was constructed during the 5th century BC. Its architects employed the golden ratio, believing it reflected cosmic harmony. The building's proportions appear perfectly balanced from every angle. And yet the Parthenon achieved something much more than mere mathematical correctness. Its subtle curves and optical refinements create an impression of living grace that seems to transcend its marble construction. The whole, in other words, is greater than the sum of the parts. Plato would argue that our universal recognition of the Parthenon's beauty stems from its participation in the eternal form of beauty itself. Aristotle characteristically brought his teacher Plato's lofty theories down to earth. He said the chief forms of beauty are order and symmetry and definiteness, which the mathematical sciences demonstrate in a special degree. Aristotle argued that beauty serves essential functions in human life and society. For him, art doesn't merely copy reality. Art completes what nature leaves unfinished. Art reveals the universal that we sometimes detect, only perhaps vaguely, in this physical world. Rome's Pantheon is a wonderful example of this idea of beauty. Perfect geometric unity, which reveals something universal and transcendent. Any of you who have visited the Pantheon in Rome probably know that its geometric portions are really perfect. Now, these two Venuses, the Venus de Milo and Venus de Medici, They both embody divine beauty through harmonious form. On the left, despite missing her arms, the Venus de Milo achieves perfect proportion and organic unity. Her contrapposto pose creates dynamic balance. Both Venus's idealized features represent not any particular woman, but the universal essence of feminine beauty. Aristotle would say that these sculptures complete what nature might attempt, but never perfectly achieve: the harmony of ideal form with living grace. This philosophy found expression in Roman portraiture, which sought to capture not just physical likeness, but moral character. The Augustus of Prima Porta, you see here, presents the emperor not merely as a powerful ruler, but as the embodiment of Roman virtue. The statue's idealized proportions recall Greek sculpture, while its symbolic details, the breastplate depicting diplomatic victory over Parthia and the Cupid referencing divine ancestry, these create a complex meditation on power, virtue, and cosmic order. And Plotinus, writing in the 3rd century AD, created the most sophisticated ancient theory of beauty. Plotinian beauty is active rather than passive. It's active rather than passive. In other words, beautiful objects don't simply possess beauty, but radiate it and draw souls toward a higher reality. And this dynamic idea of beauty had a major influence on Renaissance art and thought. Here's a summary of Plotinus's core ideas on beauty. That's Plotinus in the red robe from the School of Athens mural, with the Athena or Minerva relief above him. She is the goddess of wisdom and art, and she's looking down upon him. Plotinus believed reality flows from a single ultimate source called the One, or the Good. It's unknowable and it's impersonal, like the Hindu Brahman. This process isn't a creation in the traditional sense, but rather a series of emanations. Like sunlight emanates from the sun. That is how the created order came about, from the One. And from the One flows out the intellect. That was the first emanation. And from the intellect emanates the soul, psyche. That was the second emanation. And from the soul emanates all of material reality. Each level of reality becomes less perfect and less beautiful as it moves further from the source. Is that hard for you to believe? Plotinus asserted that material objects become beautiful, though, because they participate in or reflect, however imperfectly, the higher Platonic forms, which reside in the intellect. Let that sink in a moment, because that was the governing philosophy of the Renaissance. When we encounter beauty, then, according to Plotinus, whether in nature or in art, we experience an invitation to reflect, an invitation to contemplate. This often reminds us of our soul's original connection to higher realities. This recognition of beauty then can ignite a longing within the soul, prompting it to turn away from material distractions and embark on a journey of purification and self-discovery. Plotinus also challenged the idea that beauty is solely a matter of symmetry and a harmonious arrangement of parts. Sure, symmetry can be present in beautiful objects, but it isn't the defining element. What about things like color or light? These don't possess symmetry, yet we perceive them as beautiful, don't we? And how can symmetry explain the beauty of virtues, noble actions, the beauty of abstract thoughts? Plotinus emphasized a hierarchy of beauty, arguing for a journey of the soul from lower physical beauty, including art, to higher intellectual beauty, which culminates in a mystical vision of the good or the one, which is the primary beauty. So experiencing beauty in a person or a behavior or through art, and then particularly intellectual and spiritual beauty, well, this experience draws the soul closer to the good, leading to a spiritual transformation. So we will now travel forward to the time of the Renaissance, whose works demonstrate Plotinus's belief that true beauty doesn't merely imitate the physical world, but serves as a ladder for the soul's ascent to divine truth. Renaissance humanists didn't simply revive classical ideas about beauty, they transformed them. Marsilio Ficino, you see him on the left, head of the Florentine Platonic Academy, and heavily influenced by the ideas of Plotinus, he developed a Christian theory of beauty that really made a huge impact on Renaissance art. Like Plotinus, Ficino described a hierarchy of beauty, ascending from the physical through intellectual to divine. Each level provides glimpses of ultimate beauty, enabling the soul's return to God. So that became the great purpose of Renaissance art, even with pagan subject matter. Its purpose was to draw us toward God. Renaissance architects sought to embody such philosophical principles in built form. Brunelleschi's dome for Florence Cathedral, completed in 1436, represents the perfect synthesis of classical theory and Renaissance innovation. The structure solves enormous engineering challenges while creating a form of overwhelming beauty. Going inside and standing beneath the dome, we viewers experience both mathematical order as well as spiritual elevation. Precisely what Renaissance theorists meant by true, capital T, beauty. Giovanni Pico della Mirandola's oration on the dignity of man revolutionized thinking about beauty by emphasizing human creative capacity. Unlike the angels who were fixed in their perfection, and unlike animals which are bound by instinct, humans can choose to create beauty or ugliness. We have that freedom. We can choose nobility or baseness. This freedom makes human beings artists of themselves and gives special significance to artistic creation. In other words, artists, during the Renaissance at least, were seen as prophets, even saints. Michelangelo's David embodies Pico's vision of human dignity. The sculpture depicts the biblical hero not after his victory over Goliath, when he's a hero, but in the moment of decision before battle. David's concentrated expression and his tensed muscles suggest both vulnerability, but also determination. The human condition poised between animal instinct and divine aspiration. The work's colossal scale and perfect proportions, they proclaim the magnificence of human potential. Its beauty reflects noble traits like virtue, excellence, and divine purpose. Michelangelo's Pietà is a stunning reflection of Renaissance thinking about the spiritual dimensions of beauty. The sculpture depicts the Virgin Mary cradling the dead Christ. She wears an expression of both profound sorrow, but also perfect acceptance. The work's beauty operates on multiple levels. Platonically, it embodies eternal forms of love and sacrifice. It also achieves perfect proportion and organic unity. And from a religious perspective, it makes visible the mystery of divine love entering human suffering. The sculpture's enduring power stems from this integration of philosophical sophistication with profound emotional truth. It is art incarnated with capital S spirit. Art incarnated with spirit. Plotinus's thought through Ficino is very present in the work of Sandro Botticelli, like in The Birth of Venus. On the surface, it depicts the classical myth of Venus's emergence from the sea. But there are deeper meanings present. Venus represents divine beauty entering the material world, while her nudity signifies the soul's purity before its descent into matter. The painting's linear grace and translucent colors create an otherworldly atmosphere that invites contemplation of beauty's spiritual dimensions. The work depicts Venus emerging from the sea, which represents the descent of divine beauty into the material world. In Plotinus's and Ficino's system, this moment shows how transcendent beauty emanates from the one and takes form in the physical realm. Venus doesn't represent mere physical attraction. She embodies the heavenly Venus, divine love, and divine beauty made manifest. The painting's surface beauty, its graceful lines, its luminous colors, its harmonious composition, provides initial aesthetic pleasure, sure. It's physically beautiful. But contemplative viewers, which I'm sure all of you are, can ascend to an experience of intellectual beauty if we all recognize the work's mythological and philosophical content, and ultimately ascend to experience divine beauty by understanding Venus as a symbol of transcendent love. Now, on the left, the wind gods Zephyrus and Aura, or perhaps it's Chloris, represent the animating force that brings divine beauty into earthly existence. See them breathing on Venus? Their breath doesn't merely propel Venus physically, but symbolizes the spiritual wind that Ficino believed carried divine influences into the material world. Now, the figure on the right is Flora, preparing to clothe Venus. She's the goddess of flowers, by the way. Represents beauty's mediating function between divine and human realms. Flora's flowered garment symbolizes how material beauty, artworks even, properly understood, can guide the soul upward rather than trap it in sensual pleasure. And the roses scattered in the wind, do you see them? They allude to the Neoplatonic concept of beauty as divine emanation. You see, just as roses naturally release their fragrance, divine beauty naturally radiates into creation, making itself known through beautiful objects and experiences, even smells. The shell supporting Venus functions as both mythological attribute and philosophical symbol as well. Its spiraling form embodies mathematical ratios like the golden ratio, but it also represents new life. The shell's emergence from water symbolizes how eternal forms manifest in temporal existence. And finally, the painting's luminous quality, achieved by the artist through translucent glazes. Some of you artists know exactly what that is, and its pale colors. This creates an otherworldly atmosphere, suggesting divine illumination. Look at this painting. The ethereal light suffuses the entire scene with a sacred radiance. Isn't that so? Venus's direct gaze creates an encounter that Ficino would recognize as the soul's recognition of its divine origin. Venus's pose subtly recalls traditional depictions of Eve, while her emergence from water suggests baptismal rebirth. The painting then is both an artistic masterpiece, but it's also a spiritual path. No doubt most of you are also familiar with this Botticelli work. It's titled Primavera, or Spring. This painting is also a profound illustration of Plotinus's philosophy and Ficino's appropriation of it. The painting is meant to be read from right to left, so let's do just that. On the right side, Zephyr again, the god of the west wind. He, a being of the realm of spirit, is shown abducting Chloris, who represents the physical world. So spirit descends into the physical realm. Chloris then transforms into Flora, the goddess of flowers, scattering blossoms. Flora symbolizes the birth of beauty and life from a creative energy that only takes place when the spiritual realm connects with the physical realm. You get it? Moving further left, towards the figure in the center, Venus, the goddess of love and beauty. She is nestled in a sacred grove. Notice the strange two shapes the silhouettes of the tree leaves make against the backdrop of the blue sky, flanking either side of Venus. They form an arch over Venus. This represents a gateway to the spiritual realm. Now, right above Venus is her son, Cupid, blindfolded, and he's about to release an arrow of love. You can't see where it's aimed yet, but it's aimed right here at the three graces. These female figures represent chastity, beauty, and love. These were the highest virtues for women during the Renaissance. Finally, on the far left of the painting is the messenger god Mercury. His eyes are directed upward, and his wand, or caduceus, staff, it's pointing up, whisking away dark clouds to bring in divine light, but also pointing up toward heaven. So looking at the work again, I would like you to notice the symmetry and order of the work by following the undulating flow of the painting. You can even place your finger directly onto your screen. Start on the right side at Zephyr's wing line. Do you see it in the trees? And follow down to his head and the direction of his gaze. Then to Chloris. Then Flora. Up to the arch between Venus and Cupid. Then down toward the Graces, over to Mercury, and on up the direction of his arm and caduceus. Can you trace the movement then of this work? It's lovely, isn't it? Soothing. It's beautiful. Last but not least, in my estimation, we have Raphael's School of Athens. It depicts the great philosophers of antiquity engaged in eternal dialogue about truth. The fresco's architectural setting recalls the grandest and the most beautiful classical buildings, while its complex figural arrangements demonstrate perfect compositional harmony. As much as any Renaissance work, it reflects intellectual beauty. The central figures of Plato and Aristotle embody complementary approaches to truth. Plato pointing heavenward towards eternal forms, Aristotle gesturing toward the earthly realm of experience. The surrounding philosophers represent various paths to knowledge, while the architectural framework suggests that human reason can indeed construct enduring truths. Beauty here serves as the medium by which complex philosophical ideas become visually comprehensible and become emotionally compelling. Look closely at the architectural design behind the figures. On the left, we have a relief of Apollo. Do you see it? And on the right, we have a relief of Athena or Minerva. Apollo represents the art of reason. Athena, the art of practical wisdom. Beautiful objects and environments don't merely please, but they instruct. They shape character through our repeated exposure to harmonious forms. This principle influenced everything from the decoration of libraries to the design of gardens. Think about the architecture of the most beautiful cities that you have ever visited. I don't believe the United States has done as good of a job with architectural beauty as the other places in the world, and so it's not a good teacher of beauty. Well, now let's focus on the people. Raphael creates great energy, the energy of curiosity. Nearly everyone seems feverish in their goal of solving some problem and thus elevating their own innate capacities and stature. Such intellectual aspiration contributes to the overall beauty of this work, isn't that so? So at its best, beautiful art offers cognitive insight. Sustained engagement with beautiful works shapes character by turning our attention to harmony, proportion, and excellence. Public art and architecture that successfully achieve beauty become focal points for civic pride and identity. And the Renaissance tradition consistently presents beauty as a pathway to transcendent experience, whether conceived as contact with Platonic forms or cosmic reason or Christian divine love. These works have survived not as museum pieces, but as living demonstrations of beauty's power, its power to elevate and transform human experience. And perhaps most importantly, these artistic traditions remind us that the question, what is beauty, can't be separated from deeper questions about truth, goodness, and the meaning of human existence. And it is for that reason that I'm very excited to continue exploring such questions next week as we continue this series on beauty.